Part 129. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1281. Only after seeing her son, Han Wuniang, who felt contented, turned pale and couldn't help but let out a pained cry, and Mammy Li, who was standing beside her, jumped up in fright. Man Bao hurriedly said to her, "It's all right, I'll press a button to make her show Lokia." Han Wuniangzi was more sensitive than ordinary people, and couldn't bear the pain at all. After Man Bao pressed it for the second time, she couldn't help crying, and Mammy Li hurriedly reassured her, "Third madam, you can't cry in the confinement period, be careful." Broken eyes. Han Wuniang endured it, but in the end she couldn't hold back, tears came from the corners of her eyes, she shook her head and said, "No, it hurts too much. It hurts too much, Dr. Zhou, don't press it." Man Bao put his hand away, looked at her sympathetically and said, "It's all right, you can rest for a while, and I'll press it after a while." She has also pressed this on the anthropomorphic model, but when pressed on it, it will not give any feedback, only changes in body functions, but she has read it in the book, and this method is slightly painful. She felt it was only a little pain at first, but after sutured her just now, she thought, the uterus was sutured in the end, how could the pressure of the uterus only cause a little pain? Based on this, Man Bao was very warm and did not continue to press, but decided to keep the water flowing, press twice at a time, and press it several times. Keek felt that if Han Wuniang knew about her idea, she would definitely regret the pain at this time. Man Bao is a doctor who is very considerate of patients, so seeing her in such pain, she really has nothing to do, so she just started thinking about acupuncture. So after pressing it back and forth several times, and seeing that Wuniang Han couldn't bear the pain, she took out the needle bag and tentatively gave her a needle to relieve the pain. Han Wuniang's face looked a little better, and Li Ma took the child over and whispered, "Third madam, this servant took the child to feed the nurse." Man Bao glanced at it and immediately said, "The child is a little weak, or would you try to feed yourself for the first 2 months? Wuniangzi Han was stunned. "Hello." Man Bao nodded and said, "Mother's colostrum is better for the child." "How long did your nanny take?" Han Wuniang didn't speak. The one who could be selected to be the nanny was naturally a woman who had already given birth. She looked at her son and said at a loss, "But I can't feed it." Man Bao, I will teach you." Mammy Li turned her head and looked at Man Bao, who was still wearing a little lady's hair, and was silent. Wu Niangzi didn't think about this, and clumsily hugged the child and looked at Man Bao. After thinking about it for a while, Man Bao said, "You have to wipe it with warm water and let the child suck it by himself." "Mammy Li, this is not good, you have to open the milk first." Man Bao, "Oh, the child will help her open it. My mother said that the first thing a child learns after birth is to open his mouth to cry and open his mouth to eat." But Mammy Li felt that this was the practice of poor families, who in small households would not come to a bowl of good milk first, then open the milk, and then feed the children. And big families like them don't have to feed their mother at all. Even if it was Zhou Man's suggestion, Mammy Li didn't really suggest Han Wu Niangzi to feed herself at this time. She had just had her belly taken out. It was a miracle that she could wake up, speak, and sit up from the bed. "What's the matter, you still have to feed yourself." She felt that the third wife was too aggrieved. Man Bao told Han Wu Niangzi, "After breastfeeding, your uterus will contract, reduce bleeding, and recover faster. Not to mention, it's good for the child." She listed various benefits, and Han Wu Niangzi was even more moved. Mammy Li said displeased, "Dr. Zhou Xiao, you haven't given birth to a child, don't you know that feeding a child is also very hard? If the child is a little older, it will bite people with a lot of strength. It's all right, don't you have a nurse?" After a month or two, Mrs. Han Wu's confinement, the wounds are all healed, and the baby is stable, so let's feed the nurse. Mammy Li, at that time, our fifth lady is in good health, but we won't let her feed her. Man Bao, it's said that it's for colostrum, and also to calm the yin and yang of your Wu Niangzi, and for her to recover faster after giving birth. Mammy Li was shocked, our fifth lady is now hurt and has to breastfeed. This. Man Bao was speechless for a while, then turned to look at Han Wu Niangzi, then do you believe in me, or do you believe in her? Han Wu Niangzi naturally believed in Man Bao more in her heart, but she didn't show it immediately. Instead, she looked at Mammy Li apologetically and asked Man Bao in a low voice, if you feed him, there will be milk. Man Bao nodded, my eldest sister and sister-in-law feed like this, so naturally, you can try it out. I don't need to talk about it anymore, I also know the formula for opening milk. Mammy Li watched the two of you make a decision, and then Man Bao asked the servant to bring a pot of hot water over. Han Wu Niang endured the pain and turned around to unbutton her clothes to feed the child, her face flushed from shyness. Mammy Li sighed and stepped forward to help, teaching her how to hold the child. The little baby's mouth moved. It was clumsy at first, but later became more flexible and stronger. Maybe it was because he couldn't get milk for a long time. He snorted eagerly. Strange feeling, and then I felt that the child was sucking something. The child also slowly quieted down. Mrs. Hanwu looked at the little baby in her arms and finally felt at ease. She raised her head and looked at Man Bao, this is my son. Man Bao nodded, yes, it's yours. When Li Sanlang found out, Han Wu Niangzi had already fed the child, and he scratched his head in confusion, can she feed the child? So is she okay? Mammy Li said with a complicated face. Dr. Zhou Xiao said, it's still early, and we have to wait 3 days before talking, but feeding the child is good for the third wife. It's a good thing. What's so good about this? How can anyone still be tired and feed their children when they are injured? It's a pity that Man Bao explained to them that they didn't understand, but Man Bao suggested that Han Wuzi would like to, and they couldn't stop it. As a result, the news that Han Wu Niangzi was feeding the child by herself within 2 hours of having her belly opened and taking the child spread all over the Li family instantly. The wives of Li's house, who had been shunned by Madame Han, couldn't help but go to the yard to inquire, wanting to see Wu Niangzi with their own eyes. When did they give birth to a child and they didn't suffer from the pain? If tummy tuck is easier than their natural birth. I heard that Han Wuniang was in a drowsiness when she opened her abdomen to take the child, and she didn't feel at all. Half a quarter of an hour, who doesn't give birth to a child for several hours? When the first child was born, the pain lasted for a day and a night, but Han Wuniang was done in half a quarter of an hour. Even Mrs. Han, who watched the whole process, was influenced to ponder until she saw how Man Bao pressed her sister's stomach to make her show lokia. Then her sister wanted to eat, but Man Bao stopped her. She was really hungry and just took a sip of warm water. Mrs. Han finally knew why Zhou Man stayed. If it was them, they would definitely not be able to stop Mrs. Han Wu, who wanted to eat. See you at 6 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1282. Wu Niangzi Han didn't eat anything this morning, and now it's getting dark, she still can't eat, and she can't help but feel a little uncomfortable. Man Bao had just eaten dinner and encouraged her, how about you get out of bed and take 2 steps? You can eat after you have exhausted. Han Wu Niangzi, exhaust. It's just farting, Man Bao said, you can eat when you have exhausted all the gas in your stomach. Han Wu Niangzi. Everyone was puzzled, why do you have to fart before you can eat? Exhaust is to restore the intestines, Man Bao said, don't worry, if you still can't exhaust in the morning tomorrow, I will give you a needle to try, but you have to move it yourself, it will help the exhaustion. Han Wu Niang didn't understand, but seeing Man Bao insisted, she still endured the pain and moved a bit, but she still couldn't get out of bed, she felt it was too painful. Man Bao helped her move her feet. Seeing that she was screaming, and Mrs. Han was covering her mouth to help but didn't dare to reach out, she stopped after a quarter of an hour. In fact, she also prepared a lot of actions to help exhaust, but looking at Han Wu Niangzi, it doesn't seem like she can do it. Man Bao sighed. Han Wu Niang drank some warm water, but she was so hungry that Man Bao reluctantly agreed to drink some rice soup. Originally, the kitchen had prepared vegetable soup for her, because Man Bao had said that vegetable soup was also fine. So the kitchen stewed the soup with good pork ribs, and put fresh vegetables that are very rare in this season. After serving it, Man Bao took a look at the meat in the soup and ate it by himself. She and Wu Niangzi, who looked at her eagerly, said, "I'm all here for your own good." Then someone went to the kitchen and filled a bowl of rice soup for her to eat. Han Wu Niang was hungry for a day and a night, and her eyes were blurred the next day. She felt that she had no strength in her body. Still gave her a needle. This is just an aid, and it may not be effective. As a result, it didn't take long for the needle to go down, and I don't know if the effect of acupuncture and moxibustion was too good, or if it happened to happen. Han Wuniang began to release a series of qi. Hearing that voice, Mammy Li and the other servants did not change their expressions, while Madame Han on the side turned away in disgust. Man Bao didn't change his face, but he quietly took a few steps back, and encouraged Han Wu Niangzi, who was about to hide under the quilt. "Yes, that's it. You can eat when you are exhausted." Man Bao checked the wound and was satisfied after changing the medicine for her. After giving her a painkiller, he told her, "Try to eat liquid food, some soup, porridge, etc., don't eat too greasy, take good care of it." Han Wu Niangzi was drinking the soup, and while watching Man Bao put away the needle bag and stood up, she asked, "Dr. Zhou Xiao, are you leaving?" Man Bao nodded. "You have exhausted gas, and you didn't burn last night. That's almost it. The rest is to recover from your injuries. By the way, you are still living in this room, don't let too many people in, and prepare more at home. Some herbs, I will look back to see if they need to be sterilized, and if they need to be smoked again." Man Bao asked Mrs. Han to go out with her, just in time to see several wives from Li's house coming to see Mrs. Han Wu, but she was stopped by the maid at the door. But Man Bao could see that the maid might not be able to stop her. Sure enough, they quickly came over to Mrs. Han and asked with a smile, "Eldest sister Han, how is the fifth lady?" Mrs. Han smiled, "It's much better. Thanks to your help this time, the things prepared in the house can be so complete." It was also the first time for the wives to meet Man Bao directly after the operation, because before she either stayed in her own guest room or stayed in the delivery room to accompany Han Wu Niangzi. They wanted to see everyone, but Han De Niang stopped them. So after asking Mrs. Han, they looked at Man Bao with 5 points of curiosity, 3 points of excitement and 2 points of suspicion, and asked about the situation of Mrs. Han Wu, and by the way, they expressed their desire to visit and condolence. In fact, they want to see if Han Wu Niang is really alive and awake now. Man Bao refused their request, but seeing their eyes still flashed with excitement, and Mrs. Han was a little hesitant after being asked repeatedly, Man Bao thought about it and said, "Actually, caesarean section is not that difficult compared to other medical techniques, but no one ever thought about having a baby like this. Do you know why?" The wives were very interested, because they had all given birth or were about to have children, so they showed expressions of interest. Man Bao said, "Because it's easy to die." All the ladies, "Is it still necessary for her to say this?" Man Bao said again, "Do you know why it is so easy to die?" Mrs. Ler hesitated, "How about an abdominal opening, because of blood loss?" Man Bao nodded, "This is one aspect, but there is also the danger of heavy bleeding in natural production." Man Bao, "It's actually not that difficult to sew. Everyone sews a lot, skills come naturally." The real difficulty is that there are external evils. Man Bao stretched out his hand, waved it in the air, and said, whether it is spring breeze, summer wind, autumn wind, or winter cold, external evils are everywhere, except for diseases that come from the inside out, the rest is from the outside in. Disease, this kind of disease from the outside in is called external evil. Man Bao simply told them her own understanding of sickness before leaving. Look, this is the skin, very complete, with only fine pores. Man Bao stretched out his hand and rolled up his sleeves to show them. At this time, if the evil spirits want to invade the body, they can only enter through the mouth, nose, and pores, but because the hands are often exposed, the body naturally has a height of resistance. In contrast, exogenous pathogens prefer to enter from more sensitive and large places such as the neck, mouth, and nose. So often, when you go to the doctor for a cold, fever or dizziness, the doctors often say that it is an invasion of exogenous pathogens. The wives were stunned. This was easy to understand, so they nodded again, and then what? Then, one day, I slashed a knife on my already sensitive stomach and opened it up. Will the ubiquitous evils rush into the body at this time? Man Bao stroked his hand in the air, describing in detail. Said, as soon as this belly is opened, the exogenous evil cannot pass through the skin, and can rush into the belly. Do you think this is terrible? The wives turned pale and were frightened by the description of Man Bao. Man Bao continued, do you know why soldiers on the battlefield were not hacked to death when fighting, but they always die after being injured? It's because of these exogenous evils that this is where caesarean section is difficult. Mrs. Han was also frightened. That fifth lady. Wu Niangzi is fine now, because I smoked the house with Kangzi before the operation, which reduced the exogenous evil in the house a lot. Best effort. See you at 9. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1283. But you always carry exogenous evils on your body, especially the exogenous evils on your body are different. If you all enter the delivery room and get close to Wu Niangzi, then the evils on your body will pass through her unhealed wounds into the body, and then she will have a fever and all kinds of diseases. Mrs. Han immediately said, don't worry, Mrs. Zhou, I won't let them in. I will have to change my clothes before entering. The wives of Li's residence also reacted immediately and said quickly, then let's wait for the fifth lady to get better before visiting her. Seeing that they were finally convinced, Man Bao immediately showed a satisfied smile. She turned around happily and was about to go home when she met Li Shangshu and Han Shangshu, who were standing at the gate of the courtyard with a calm face. Man Bao. Man Bao was invited to the study to speak. Li Shangshu sat on the first seat, leaned forward slightly, and asked, Dr. Zhou Xiao, you just said that most soldiers on the battlefield died after being injured because of the invasion of foreign evil. Man Bao was a little embarrassed. After all, she had just finished scaring their daughter and daughter-in-law, but she quickly turned her face and nodded solemnly, yes, the imperial physicians must know this truth. If you don't believe me, go ask the old man. Imperial Physician Tan and Imperial Physician Lu. Li Shangshu pondered and asked, is there a way? Man Bao nodded and said, of course, like this time, I usually use Kangzi to sterilize, wash my hands more, use boiling water to scald and dye utensils, boil the water, clean the gauze, and pay attention to the cleanliness of wounds. It's a small thing, but it can also bring countless people alive. Man Bao herself knew that before she studied medicine, her brothers liked to drink water directly from the water tank when they were thirsty and tired, without burning it at all. Even Datu and the others followed suit. She changed it for a long time before she changed it, but even now, Daji and the servants in the family would find it too troublesome to go to the kitchen, so they drank water directly from the water tank, unless it was a big winter. Man Bao once scooped a spoonful of water into the system under the guidance of Keek, and used the laboratory in the teaching room to look at the things in the water, and was stunned. Then the spoon of water was included by Keek, but the points were very few. Because Keek said that there are creatures in the water on several planets in its world, which is not uncommon, but the encyclopedia still gave her a little bonus point. Li Shangshu was still pondering, but Han Shangshu had already said, it is impossible to do the same on the battlefield. If nothing else, the wounded soldiers are all looking for an open space to put down, not even a tile. How much Kangshu is enough to smoke? Man Bao frowned and said, isn't there a tent? That tent is not enough for all the wounded soldiers to enter. Li Shangshu said, then start with the simplest, clean gauze, boiled water, and clean hands. He said, let's talk to Zhen Yuan when you have time. Han Shangshu acquiesced. Man Bao scratched his head and asked, Li Shangshu, are we going to war in Dajin? Li Shangshu reacted at this time, and immediately smiled, no, that's all, to take precautions before it happens. Dr. Zhou Xiao, this time it's really hard for you. I heard that Saburo's daughter-in-law can already get out of bed and walk. Han Shangshu also looked at her immediately. Man Bao said, you can get out of bed, but she is afraid of pain, so she can only move 2 steps. I mean, even if she wants to move, she has to move 2 steps. This is good for recovery. Han Shangshu didn't expect that his daughter could really get out of bed and walk last night. He heard the eldest lady say that the belly was cut open directly, and the child was taken directly from the belly. He nodded dumbly, not knowing if he heard it. Man Bao shook his head slightly, got up, and left. The 2 ministers quickly retained it. Man Bao insisted, I've stayed all night, and I really have to go home, otherwise my family will be worried. The family was really not worried. Man Bao jumped out of the carriage happily, pushed open the door and rushed to the backyard to announce loudly that he was back. Only Xiang Mingxiu, who lived in the east wing, heard the sound and opened the window and looked over, then laughed, you're back. He said, Bai Shan and Bai Cheng haven't come back from school yet. Your 4th brother took someone out, saying that he took over the job of Ji Shitang and went out to transport medicinal materials. He may not be back until tomorrow. Mr. Zhuang went out to meet people. Went to enjoy the snow. So now there is no one at home, except for Xiang Mingxiu. Man Bao was a little disappointed, so he simply walked over and asked, what about Xiang Chao? He went to fetch the things. You didn't give me the blueprints before. Mr. Lu found someone to make the things for my rehabilitation. Yesterday, when Bai Shan and the others came back, they said that the things were made, and he went to fetch them today. Man Bao is disappointed. The servants of Li's house finally came in behind. They carried a lot of things and asked, Dr. Zhou, where do you see these things? Man Bao said, put it in my room. Xiang Mingxiu saw that the servants were carrying cloth, various gift boxes, and 2 pots of peonies. He was very curious, and after the people left, he asked, I understand giving cloth and gift boxes, why are you still giving peonies at this time? Man Bao sighed and said, I don't know who spread the rumors. It was said that I like exotic flowers and plants, and peony is the flower of wealth. Mrs. Han thought I would like it, so I picked 2 pots from their flower room. Send me the best. She said. I firmly refused, but she was determined to send it. There was no way. It doesn't look good when pushed around, so I can only accept it. God knows she really wants to quit. Beautiful peony flowers, who has more of them in her hands? Xiang Mingxiu smiled, like Mrs. Han, she only treated her as a courtesy. When Man Bao saw it, he sighed deeply, how could no one believe the truth? Seeing her like this, Xiang Mingxiu believed it a bit and asked curiously, don't you like flowers and plants, why don't you like peonies? I like it, but I have peonies. I just want to collect flowers and plants that I haven't seen before. Xiang Mingxiu didn't expect her to have so many problems, and smiled. This is difficult, who can know what flowers and plants you have seen and what flowers and plants you haven't seen? He said, it's better, you can accept what others give you. After it is spread, people will naturally know that you really like flowers and plants, and they will give you this next time. Man Bao thought about it for a while and felt that his method was good, so he reached out and gave him a thumbs up. The Li family sent many things to Man Bao, but it was not from Li Shangshu's family, but from Li Sanlang. Man Bao picked and chose, put the cloth aside, and planned to wait for Zhou Lejun to come back and put it away for her. The cloth she received was usually put away for her. There are also jewelry aside, and I plan to wait for Zhou Lejun to pick them and put them in the system, and then they can give them to my mother and sister-in-law when I get home. The box of silver that was sent was put into the system after a glance, and then an account was recorded in a small notebook. As for the peony flowers sent, Man Bao took a look and carried them to the study, intending to wait for the husband to return and transfer them to him. It's really hard to take care of peonies in winter, so she shouldn't bother. Well, Aunt Zheng also likes flowers very much. I can send her a pot tomorrow so that the husband will not have to work too hard. See you tomorrow. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1284. Because it was still early, Man Bao packed everything up and no one came back. She looked around the yard, and finally had no choice but to go to Xiang Mingxiu to speak. Of course, she didn't go empty-handed, she took the needle bag over. Man Bao gave him a needle to stimulate his hamstring, and then asked, how are you feeling these 2 days? Xiang Mingxiu smiled and said, according to your advice, I will try to move my toes every day. Now I can feel my toes, but they are not very sensitive. Man Bao encouraged, take your time. Generally, rehabilitation will take more than 3 months. This can't be rushed. After Man Bao checked Xiang Mingxiu's rehabilitation, he had nothing to do after recording them one by one. Seeing that she couldn't calm down, Xiang Mingxiu took the initiative to ask, did you go well with your abdominal surgery? Man Bao's eyes lit up, she was excited, and she immediately started talking to him. Of course, she didn't have much to say, because she couldn't describe to him in detail how the operation was done, and it would violate the patient. Private. All she can say is that the child has been successfully removed, and then what will she do if she encounters such a case in the future? Surgery in real life is very different from surgery in the system, especially in some details. Although she didn't show it, she knew the shortcomings of what had happened. The family background of Han and Li's family is here, and the preparation time is long. She feels that there will be no such a complete surgical environment in the future. If the women you meet in the future are not able to give birth naturally, you must have a cesarean section, and the survival rate will be much lower than this operation. Because the situation of the mother and the environment will definitely be worse. After all, not everyone can be like the Han and Li families. When a pregnant woman is 6 or 7 months old, she can ask a skilled doctor or imperial doctor to consult her. I can still find her here. More people in this world may be like second sister Fu, who didn't know that the fetal position was not right until they were about to give birth, and that it was not suitable for a natural delivery. There are even more people who can't afford a doctor after knowing it, and can't ask a doctor to make a way out for them. Thinking of this, Man Bao sighed a little sadly. It was the first time for Xiang Mingxiu to hear her talk about surgery, and she couldn't keep up with her brain circuits at all. She sighed as she spoke. He was considering whether to ask another question. After all, he didn't quite understand the girl's mind. As a result, before he could speak, there was the sound of Dang Deng running in the yard. He looked out and saw Bai Shan and Bai Cheng running into the yard, glanced around and shouted to the sky, Man Bao. The person beside him who was sighing a moment ago immediately jumped up, responded with a loud "I'm here," and then rushed out. The three of them met in the yard, and Bai Shan laughed and said, "As soon as we got off the bus, the concierge told you that you were back, and we hurried back to find you." Bai Erlang asked, "Why didn't you go to the Imperial College to pick us up when you came back?" Man Bao said, "You guys didn't go to school again. The Li family's carriage took me home directly. Daji was not here, my fourth brother was not here, and even my husband was not here. Bai Shandao, when you were away, your fourth brother had a business deal with the shopkeeper Zheng Da. It seems that a few trucks of medicinal materials from Ji Shitang were blocked in Kizhu, and the snow was too thick there, so your fourth brother brought the three sons and the others went to help, and they may not come back until tomorrow." He smiled and asked, "Seeing how happy you are, is Han Wu Niang's illness stabilized?" Man Bao said, "It's almost, people can already eat, I can't do much if I stay there, so I will come back first." "Can't we go in and talk, why stay outside in such a cold day?" Bai Erlang finally interjected. The three moved to the study to talk, while Daji went to the kitchen to get them some warm refreshments. Bai Shan noticed the difference as soon as he entered the study. He walked to the two pots of peonies in the corner and asked, "Is this from the Li family?" Man Bao sighed and said, "Miss Han gave it to me. I don't know who was spreading rumors outside, saying that I like exotic flowers and plants. Madame Han chose two pots of good peonies to give to me." Bai Erlang laughed when he heard the words, "They don't know that you like weeds." Man Bao, "Nonsense, I like all kinds of flowers and plants." Bai Shan smiled and said, "But you only like the flowers and plants you saw for the first time, and you won't be so excited to see you again." "But I still like it." Man Bao felt that her love for them had never changed, but she only showed 2 points more at the first meeting because of Keek's relationship. Bai Shan squatted in front of the peony, looked at it and said, "This pot seems to be Yao Huang, but the branches and leaves are much smaller than what you brought back, and the flowers may not be as big as what you brought back." Man Bao said, "Then this is the real Yao Huang. What she brought back is the end of a generation, and even the genes are not stable, just like fake flowers." Man Bao said, "I plan to give it to my husband, and then give it to Aunt Zheng. Doesn't Aunt Zheng also like flowers?" Bai Shan nodded, thought about it, and then said, "Can you still find those different flowers? Why don't you buy a few more pots? My mother likes to grow flowers." Man Bao scratched his neck and whispered, "It's not good, let's forget it." When Bai Shan heard it, he finally remembered, "By the way, your flowers are faulty." He stared at the two pots of peonies and said thoughtfully, "Man Bao, I suddenly remembered something." "What's up?" "Bai Shan, you often see the rich and powerful now, and you are famous. If they win you over, they will start with your preferences. Do you think the flowers you sold this summer will return to you after a few turns in hand?" Man Bao was stunned. Bai Erlang also squatted in front of Peony, rubbed his chin and said, "I remember when you said that. Ji Hao seems to have mentioned that when the family returned to Beijing, his mother bought some precious flowers in Yizhu City. I also brought them back, that white peony." Bai Shan and Bai Erlang turned to look at Man Bao together. "Man Bao," she said with some guilty conscience, "white peony is not expensive, even if you only watch it for one season, it's worth the money, okay?" "Yes," Bai Shan nodded, thoughtfully. "Who are the flowers in the hands of Princess Yizhu now? By the way, the palace of Yizhu has been copied." The Yizhu palace was indeed stolen. Most of the gold and silver treasures in the palace in Yizhu were naturally transported back to the treasury, but flowers, grasses, etc., if they were accidentally smashed and razed to death, were naturally wasted. Therefore, most of them were divided between local officials and aristocratic families. The ones in the capital were also copied. At that time, the Queen Mother was seriously ill, and she was determined to protect the remaining family members of the king of Yizhu. Like these flowers and plants, no one in the palace likes them, so no one pays attention, but recently, the palace guards who guarded the palace heard that the crown princess liked flowers and plants, so they sent a few pots of good flowers and plants in the palace. He didn't have any other intentions, he just wanted to change places, even if he went to Huangchuang. Otherwise, they will stay in the Yizhu Wangfu, and when the Xingqing County prince goes to the fief, the palace servants of the Wangfu will also follow. Following a rebellious prince's son to the fief, I wanted to know what the future was like, but for them, the future is not the most important thing, the important thing is to live. If His Majesty remembers to liquidate in the future, what about the palace servants who followed them to the fief? See you at 4 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1285. The crown princess received a lot of precious flowers and plants, some of which were kept in the flower room, and decided to reward Man Bao after a while. Part of it was given to the queen so that she could also watch it. When she sent the flowers, the queen was summoning Dr. Lu, who had just returned to the palace. The queen beckoned and asked the crown princess to sit down and listen together. Dr. Lu only paused and continued. The crown princess was stunned, and the queen looked very calm, and asked, "So, now Han Wuniang can get out of bed and move around?" Dr. Lu lowered her head and replied, "She can move out of bed by herself, but it hurts a lot, so she can't get up, so she can only move 2 steps with the bed." The crown princess couldn't help swallowing her saliva, and asked while covering her heart, "Didn't you just cut the belly to take the child the day before? You can actually go down to the ground." Dr. Lu responded in a low voice and said, "Dr. Zhou Xiao said that you need to exercise properly, so that uterine contractions will reduce bleeding and the wound will recover faster." The queen nodded and asked, "So the 5th lady of the Han family is safe now, right?" All doctors will not give a definite answer, and Lu Yingnu is naturally the same. She whispered, "The wound has not healed, and there will be a small amount of bleeding, so it is not necessarily, it depends on how well you take care of it. After all, if the wound is in the abdomen, there may still be inflammation. Patients with trauma are most afraid of inflammation." The queen asked, "Dr. Zhou Xiao also said the same?" "Yes." Lu Yaonu thought for a while and repeated what Man Bao and several wives of Li's house had said about the invasion of foreign evil, and then said, "Dr. Zhou Xiao said that it is precisely because of these reasons that the risk of caesarean section is extremely high, it is far inferior to natural birth, and the caesarean section is also very harmful to the mother, so it is not used unless it is absolutely necessary." The queen nodded, looked up at Lu Yunu and said with a smile, "You have also become a lot quieter studying with Dr. Zhou Xiao." Dr. Lu responded immediately, "Yes, Dr. Zhou Xiao taught me very carefully and never kept secrets. In addition to acupuncture, she taught us a lot this time, even medicine." The queen's delicate heart raised her eyebrows when she heard the words, and asked softly, "So, Dr. Zhou is willing to train you?" "Yes." Lu Yunu's palms were sweating, and she lowered her head to repeat what Man Bao said when she was combing her hair that day, and said, "Dr. Zhou said that women in the world suffer a lot more than men. There are very few women who can go to the pharmacy of the hospital to see a doctor after being ill. Most of them rely on suffering when they are sick. Already." When the queen heard this, she sighed deeply, turned her head and said to the princess, "She is a child, but she has the virtue of compassion and compassion. In comparison, I am the mother of the country, what more shame?" The crown princess immediately got up and knelt down. "Mother-in-law, this is the daughter-in-law's dereliction of duty. You have been in a sick bed for a long time, how can you bother to do these things?" The queen shook her hand and said, "It's my fault, the crown princess doesn't have to cover it up." She turned to Lu Yunu and said, "Since she has the heart to teach, would you like to study with her?" This is to ask her whether she will go out of the palace to marry a husband and teach children in the future, Or will she follow Zhou Man to practice medicine and consult a doctor? Although she had come to a decision after thinking about it for a day and a night, Dr. Lu still hesitated for a moment, but when she looked up and saw the gentle color on the queen's face, the hesitation dissipated, and she knelt down. Said, I would like to learn medical skills from Dr. Zhou Xiao, and I hope that women in the world can go to the pharmacy of the medical center to see a doctor when they are sick or injured. The empress nodded in relief, went to the bed to help her up, and smiled at the crown princess. This is a blessing in the world, and you should be more careful in the future. The crown princess understood what the queen was going to do, and hurriedly bowed her head. The queen didn't stay with Liu's daughter for a long time, and said, You have been tired for 2 days, go home today to see your relatives, and come back to the palace in the morning tomorrow. By the way, tomorrow Dr. Zhou will go to the palace to give the prince an injection, right? The crown princess replied, Yes. The queen nodded and said, Tomorrow, you can come with Dr. Zhou Xiao. The crown princess responded and bowed and walked out. Aunt Chang helped the queen to rest, and said softly, Your health is better, do you have to work again? The queen said, Look, how old are they? They are already worried about the people and the country. In comparison, I am far behind. Aunt Chang smiled and said, You are humbled again. You were able to take care of the backyard for His Majesty at 14 o'clock and lead the soldiers of a government to fight against the chaotic army. Wasn't it more dangerous than this? That's different, said the queen with a smile. It was a troubled time, and I had to do it. Every step of the way was pushed by the overall situation, but she didn't. The queen said softly, It's not my praise, Zhou Man is indeed the most intelligent child I have seen over the years. Aunt Chang smiled and said nothing. The queen sat on the bed with her hand, and said, There are quite a few children in the noble family who are as smart as her, but there are very few children who are as smart as her. There was another word that the queen did not say, that is, the crown princess. She was smart, but she lacked her spiritual wisdom. Still, that's not a bad thing. The queen sighed faintly and thought deeply. When Aunt Chang saw it, she wanted to persuade but was not able to persuade her. Sure enough, the queen lost sleep at night. The emperor felt dry mouth in the middle of sleep, got up and drank a glass of water, turned around and saw that the queen's eyelids trembled, and knew that she was not asleep, so he pushed her and said, Don't pretend to be asleep, open your eyes if you can't sleep. The queen didn't open her eyes, but continued to close them. Even if you don't fall asleep, you can always rest for a while when you close them. The emperor climbed into the bed, leaned against the head of the bed and asked her, What are you thinking about? But is the mother embarrassing you? The queen opened her eyes and sat up from the bed. The emperor helped her take the pillow and put it on her back. The queen sighed and shook her head, No, the queen mother treats me well. I want to ask Zhou Man to do something. The emperor laughed and said with a smile, I thought it was something. If you have something to ask her, just say it straight. Yes, she loves money. If she doesn't want it, you can give her more money. The queen felt that the emperor was not serious and gave him a sideways glance. The emperor said sternly, Okay, you say, what do you want to ask her to do? I want to ask her to teach more medical women, the queen said after a pause. No, it's not a medical woman, but a female doctor, who can diagnose pulses and prescribe prescriptions like her, and treat patients and save lives. It's not easy, the emperor said with a smile. This medicine is a kung fu from a young age. I heard that she began to learn it when she was very young. You are asking people to learn it for a while, and I am afraid that you will not be able to learn anything. Come. Thinking of the gossip he heard today, the emperor asked, Are you trapped by the Wu Niangzi of Han Wei's family? Do you want the medical girls to learn from Zhou Man the skill of taking children from the abdomen? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1286. The Queen said, "How could that be easily learned?" She pondered for a moment and said, "I asked, Joe Man started studying medicine at the age of 6 or 7, and it has only been 6 or 7 years now, but she is literate early, smart, and indeed faster than the average person. I do not ask for all the female doctors in her are as powerful as her, but they can cure most common diseases. I want all the medical girls in the palace to follow her to learn medical skills. Most of them have a foundation. At least they have memorized the names of commonly used medicinal materials, and it is easier to learn." The emperor was curious, why did Zitong suddenly remember this? The queen smiled and said, "It's still because of Zhou Man and Lu Yunu." She said what Dr. Lu said today, and said, "Zhou Man has a heart of compassion and is willing to teach Dr. Lu, which is obviously different from other doctors. Although the imperial physicians work in the imperial hospital, there are very few who are really willing to teach outsiders the skills of housekeeping. This is still a polite statement. In fact, there is not a single one who is really willing to teach people, but they are not in the imperial hospital." The queen said, "You can tell just by looking at my medical girls who have worked in the imperial hospital for many years but haven't learned much. The Dr. Xiao and Dr. Lu are from the family of the imperial physician." The queen said, "Zhou Man is willing to teach, so I want her to teach more." The emperor laughed. Could it be that Zitong still wants to set up another maid's hospital? The queen didn't expect this, but now she pondered, it's not too bad. The emperor's brows twitched, and he felt a little regretful that he had mentioned this. He set up another imperial hospital, which has to be restructured, just to serve the harem. The queen said, "I originally thought that these women would be sent out to other places after they became medical practitioners. After they went out, they could also see a doctor and prescribe prescriptions in a pharmacy. Wouldn't there be less life for women in the world? This is also good for the reproduction of the population." The emperor couldn't help but sit up slightly. "Do you want to send it to other places?" The queen nodded. The emperor pondered, "If that's the case, it's not impossible, but what if they don't want to? After all, it's a matter of publicity." The queen said, "There will always be people who are willing, and there will always be ways. Does it rely on Zhou Man alone to teach? I heard people say that she will travel thousands of mountains and rivers in the future, and will not stay in one place for a long time." Obviously, the emperor also knew what she said to the prince. The queen twisted him and said, "This matter is very complicated, and I can't settle down for a while, but I want to ask your majesty, if the concubine insists on doing it, then the concubine's hospital. I set it up for you." "What about the money?" the queen said. "Professor disciples, the consumption of medicinal materials, manpower, and material resources all need money." The emperor took her hand and said with a smile, "I'll get it for you from the private library. Is this okay?" Only then did the queen become satisfied, and she snuggled into his arms and said, "Thank you, your majesty." The emperor hugged her and patted her shoulders and said, "Okay, can you sleep peacefully now?" "You, just worry too much," the imperial doctor said. "You are sick and resting, you can leave these things outside to you. Just do it for the crown princess, she will be the mother of the country in the future, you teach her not to work too hard." The queen responded, but she was well informed, and even if she didn't think about it, she couldn't help but think. So she didn't sleep well all night. When she saw Man Bao the next day, she dressed up, but who is Man Bao? At first glance, she felt that the queen's face was not quite right, but after a closer look, she found that it was mostly pink, so she asked the queen for her pulse. The queen, who specially asked the inner supervisor to announce the arrival of Man Bao, couldn't help but put her hands in front of her belly and said with a smile, "Dr. Zhou Xiao, today is not the day for my consultation. I came here for something else. Man Bao said, since you're here, I'll take a look at the queen by the way. I see that your eyes seem to be blue and black, are you not sleeping well? Man Bao looked worried, is it possible that the condition has recurred and I can't sleep at night? When Man Bao said this, he looked at Aunt Chang. Aunt Chang. She silently looked up at the queen. The queen coughed lightly and said, fortunately, I slept a little late last night. I invited you to come here for Dr. Liu's business. Man Bao's attention was immediately diverted, Liu doctor girl. The queen smiled and nodded, and asked, I heard from Dr. Liu that Dr. Zhou Xiao is willing to teach her medical skills. Man Bao nodded, yes, if she is willing to come and learn from me. The queen asked with a smile, Your Majesty plans to set up a new imperial hospital in the palace for female doctors. I wonder if Dr. Zhou Xiao would like to serve in the palace. Man Bao refused without even thinking about it, and declined, Niang, I'm still young, so I'm afraid I won't be an official. What an official asks is talent, not age. But I still have a lot of deficiencies in my medical skills, and I want to learn more from a doctor outside. Queen, you can also learn from the imperial physicians in the imperial hospital when you enter the palace. Man Bao still shook his head, although imperial physician Xiao and the others are also very good, the illnesses that I have been exposed to in the palace are limited. I still prefer to be in Jishitang, and I may have to travel to other places in the future, so I don't dare to be recruited by the Empress. The queen sighed and said, but I want to send more medical girls like Lu Yunu to study with you. In the future, when they learn, they can not only work in the queen's hospital, but also be sent to local places to treat people. Didn't you say that it is extremely difficult for women in the world to see a doctor? If there is a female doctor, it will definitely be much better. When Man Bao heard this, she hesitated for a while, but the scene where the prince took the knife and slashed the imperial doctor was too deep in her heart, so she still shook her head after the tangle. Niang, please allow me to go home and think about it, this matter is very important, I have to ask my family. The queen nodded with a smile, and said, all right, then you can go back and discuss with your family. If you are willing to accept the queen's hospital, its establishment may be lower than that of the Thai hospital, but the position of the hospital should be of the 5th rank. So she was going to be an official by accident? Still a 5th rank official, bigger than the Tang magistrate. Man Bao was stunned in his heart, and got up in a drowsy manner to leave, and Chang quickly took the opportunity to say, Dr. Zhou Xiao, please give the Empress to see the doctor, maybe you need a needle. Queen. Man Bao thought about it too. Anyway, they all came here, so let's take a look. Man Bao suppressed the various thoughts in his mind, and after he had calmed down, he felt the pulse of the queen. She felt the pulse, and then took a close look at the face of the queen, and was very sure that she hadn't slept well last night. So she sighed and asked the queen to lie down. She gave the queen an acupuncture. Seeing that she fell asleep, she sat aside in a daze. The crown princess stayed by the side. Seeing her little one sitting on the stool, her brows were about to wrinkle, so she lowered her voice and asked, is it bad to serve in the palace? This is an opportunity to honor our ancestors. See you in the next chapter at 10. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1287. Man Bao looked up at the crown princess and shook his head. Forget it, when he entered the palace, that was the servant of the royal family. Even if the crown prince had changed his habit of hacking people, there would still be other princes and grandsons. It is said that it is easy to enter the palace and difficult to leave the palace, so she should not challenge this point. The most important thing is that she promised Keek to go around and search for the flowers and plants, birds, animals, and beasts that it has never seen in the world for him. Keek took it seriously. In fact, there are not many things that have not been included in the palace. If the host really stays in the capital to be an official, it is estimated that it will not be able to include anything for a long time in the future. However, the temptation of the 5-rank officials was still great, so Man Bao went home and asked Mr. Zhuang for advice. Mr. Zhuang didn't give her an idea at first, but asked, "Do you want to be an official?" After thinking about it, Man Bao nodded and said, "I think so. If my parents knew that I was an official, or a 5th-rank official, they would definitely be crazy with joy." Mr. Zhuang nodded and asked with a smile, "Then why are you hesitating?" Man Bao slumped his shoulders and said, "I don't like being an official, especially if I'm still an imperial physician. Life and death are left to others. I think you were very brave against the king of Yizhu, and you don't seem to be afraid of death. It depends on what it is for. It's not worth it for a little fame and fortune." Bai Shan on the side also nodded. Bai Erlang doesn't have this trouble yet, but he also thinks it's a terrible thing to lose his life in order to be an official. Mr. Zhuang said with a smile, "In the end, you still can't stand it, but you also need to know that if you become the director of the women's hospital, then your ideal will be half. Do you want to be a doctor who helps the world?" Man Bao said, "I learned medical skills in the folks, and it's the same as treating more illnesses and saving people." Mr. Zhuang shook his head. "There is still a big difference between the power of oneself and the power of a country. You are a court official in the palace, and you are an official of the court, backed by national strength, but in the public, you are just a little doctor." Man Bao frowned in distress. "I'm also motivated by the Queen's proposal, but I always feel a little bad." Mr. Zhuang looked at her with a smile and asked, "What's wrong?" Man Bao frowned and said, "I haven't mastered my medical skills yet, how much can I teach them? Besides, there are only so many diseases in the palace. If I enter the palace, the diseases that I can see are limited. If I can't show good symptoms, Fangzi, the imperial physicians in the imperial hospital will not teach me their skills, so I will be trapped in the palace, which is contrary to my initial wish." Bai Shan, who was beside him, wanted to talk all the time, but Mr. Zhuang kept staring at him, so he could only hold back. Mr. Zhuang smiled and asked, "Is there any more?" After thinking about it, Man Bao shook his head. "I still want to stay in the folk, and I want to go to another place to take a look and learn from the doctors in the world." She said, "I have discovered that the doctors in this world have some diseases that they are very good at. Besides, the treatment methods for other diseases are mediocre, that is, the imperial doctor in the palace, except for 1 or 2 people, the rest are also that's the case, so I want to see what diseases doctors in other places are good at." Mr. Zhuang waved his hand and smiled and said, "Okay, since you already have a preference in your heart, then I won't stop you, just go." He glanced at Queen Bai Shan and said, "You can discuss it yourself." Bai Shan resisted the urge to speak and got up and saluted with Man Bao and was about to retreat. When he turned around, he saw Bai Erlang sitting pretending to be holding a book, so he grabbed him and said, "What are you still doing here? Don't bother, sir, just leave now." Bai Erlang followed the two of them out, standing in a mess in the cold wind. He shrank his neck and asked, "Is there anything I can't say in the study, but have to say it outside?" Man Bao glanced at him and said, "You're so stupid, you can't even see it? Mr. is training us and wants us to discuss 1, 2, or 3 by ourselves. Can we speak freely in front of him?" Bai Shan also felt that it was cold outside. He looked around and said, "Go to my room. How about letting Daji build a brazier?" Man Bao said, "Then go to the kitchen to get 2 more cakes, we will bake and eat while talking." Bai Erlang regained his energy and said, "What's the point of eating only cakes? The venison under the porch is very frozen, so I need to cut a few pieces with a knife and bake them together." Bai Shan also nodded, "Let's see what else there is in the back kitchen, but it tastes a little too big, so I can't bake it in my room." Bai Shan and Man Bao looked at Bai Erlang together. Bai Erlang froze for a moment, then jumped back, put his hands on his chest and refused. No, it's delicious to bake in my house, okay. Man Bao retracted his gaze and said, I wonder if we will get in the way in the kitchen. Bai Shan, sure, it's time to make dinner. Finally, after discussing and discussing, the three crowded into Daji's room to bake something. Daji moved the table inward, and then took a big brazier to start a fire. An iron plate was placed on it. The deer legs that were taken off were placed on the table. Before the ice had melted, Daji cut off a piece with a knife to put on a plate. The three of Bai Shan ran to the kitchen to get a lot of seasonings, and sat around the brazier, waiting for the venison to be roasted while the fire was being cooked. Bai Shan added a little charcoal to the brazier and said, you alone don't know how to split the body, and now you have to sit in the Jishatang for a consultation, and you have to study. How can you go to the palace to teach them medical skills? Man Bao blinked, then you mean not to teach? Bai Shan shook his head, I know you want to teach, but when the manpower is poor, even teaching is not like that. He said, I ask you, if a person wants to study medicine, it is normal for him to study in a pharmacy for how many years? Man Bayadao, at the age of 7 or 8, he went to work as an apprentice in a pharmacy and worked as an apprentice. He worked for 2 years. Be more diligent. The doctors may teach them a few words, and they got approval. At the age of 9 or 10, they began to memorize medicinal materials, and after 3 or 4 years. In 2018, you can start taking medicine or follow the doctor to be a medicine boy, and at least stay by the doctor's side for another 10 years or so before you can leave the school. This is the normal way, but there are also smart ones. The doctors accepted him as an apprentice early, avoiding the previous hardships, and learning from the doctors for 7 or 8 years. You can also try to prescribe prescriptions when you are 15 or 16 years old. Already. She is because of Keek and teacher Mo, otherwise the fastest speed is the second way. Of course Bai Shan also knew this, nodded and said, that's it, so the average person counts, even if you are willing to teach, regardless of the previous 5 or 6 years of polishing. If you just start teaching people, it will take 10 years before you leave the school. But I heard what the Empress said, she obviously can't wait 10 years, this female hospital is about to be built, is it only a place, no officials? Man Bao was silent. See you tomorrow. The changed name is very domineering, Zioxiu. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1288. You're alone, how many can you teach? Bai Shan said, even if you don't go to Ji Shitang for a consultation, you don't study, and you don't see a doctor, can you bring 20 students at a time? These 20 students will have to study for 10 years after you before they leave the school. At that time, Bai Shan said in a low voice, it doesn't matter if the queen is still there. If she is not here, who will remember this maid's hospital? Man Bao shuddered, but was terrified by another thing, God, then I have to stay in the palace for 10 years and only do this one thing? It's too scary. Bai Shan nodded and said, so this official can't take it. Man Bao was distressed and said, then can this maid's hospital still be built? Man Bao has read a lot of history books and stories over the years. Some of the so-called miscellaneous histories from the encyclopedia may be records from ancient times in their world. She knows too much how important this female hospital is to women in the world. She said, going forward this step, my wish may be half achieved. If I shrink back, I may become a sinner in the world in the future. Bai Erlang nodded, if someone writes down this passage, don't worry, people in future generations will definitely scold you. Man Bao. Bai Shan pushed Bai Erlang, turned his head and said to Man Bao, don't pay attention to him, although you don't accept officials, this imperial hospital can still be built, but it can't be built like this. Man Bao, then how to build it? Bai Shan thinks that it is not certain whether the queen can live to 10 years later. This policy is proposed by the Queen. If she is gone, Manbao will definitely be in a very awkward position in the future. If you can hang your seal and leave, it will be fine. The big deal is to start over, and the students you brought before can be considered as a contribution to the people. But suppose she can't even resign? Women's officials are different from men's. Don't medical women also have grades? Just not in the flow. But I have never heard of a medical woman leaving the palace and going home to marry someone when she is old, or being imprisoned in the palace because of a crime and serving her whole life. Bai Shan didn't want Manbao to be trapped in the palace all his life. He said, the queen wants to build the queen's hospital, so you can let her build it, leave the officials empty first, and then select a suitable candidate later. I think that what we considered, the queen must have also considered it, so she must be a medical woman who has been in contact with you, who came to learn medical skills. Bai Shan said, they are literate and familiar with medicinal herbs, and they are familiar with some prescriptions. I'm familiar with it, and I also know some medical principles. You can teach them for 5 or 6 years, and then let them do it. Manbao rolled his eyes. In this way, the officials of the entire female hospital are my servants. Bai Shan nodded and smiled and said, you don't need to bring too many, you only need to bring 3 or 2 students. You can let them come out to Ji Shitang to study with you, and when they are successful, let them bring 3 or 2 junior sisters by themselves. Occasionally you check and solve doubts, so that you are not tired, and you can do more things you want to do, and they also have disease internships. How good? Manbao nodded again and again. Bai Shan lowered his voice and said, if possible, you'd better decide with the Queen on the constitution of the Women's Imperial Hospital, and compare it to the current Imperial Hospital. How about the appointment, promotion, and resignation? Rewards, these regulations must be set in detail. He said, only the government that has set the charter can last for a long time. If you only rely on your blood, I am afraid that it will be abandoned after a generation. Manbao nodded, that's right, the Taiyuan hospital basically only serves the royal family and officials, and rarely does anything to benefit the people. The purpose of the women's Thai hospital is to send the trained female doctors to other places to see the people. If there is no charter, I'm afraid that as soon as the Queen goes, this matter will be over. Bai Shan nodded, but unfortunately said, the Thai hospital has always been independent of the 6 departments, and only obeyed the orders of the royal family. It would be nice if they were also recorded in the court and punished and impeached like Begwan. Manbao scratched his head and asked, is the hospital always like this? After thinking about it, Bai Shan said, it doesn't seem to be the case. I vaguely remember in which book I saw the medical book compiled by the Imperial Physician Office of the previous dynasty. There are records of the instructors, and I will go to the library of the Qiazijian later. Look in there. This was because Manbao was studying medicine, and he only flipped it when he saw it, otherwise no one would read this kind of booklet. Bai Erlang turned the venison over, sprinkled some salt and seasonings on it, the venison made a sizzling sound, and the aroma wafted everywhere. He took time to say, just ask Mr. Manbao felt reasonable, so he turned and ran to ask Mr. Bai Shan glanced at Bai Erlang, and also went out to get a small stool and set it up. He said, can't you solve such a small problem by yourself? Bai Erlang looked up at him inexplicably, there are so many books in the library, how hard it is to find a book, isn't it for you? Bai Shan said, I thank you. Bai Erlang hummed, no thanks. The two of them quarreled, and Mr. Zhuang was invited by Manbao. Seeing that they had already grilled the venison, he smiled and shook his head and said, fortunately, it is not in the study, otherwise the books in the same room will be stained with such a smell. Manbao said, it's so fragrant, it's died when it's died. Mr. Zhuang reached out and patted her head lightly, naughty. Bai Shan said, you are not afraid that you will be hungry in the future when you hold the book and smell the fragrance? Bai Erlang thought for a while and said, "That's not bad." Mr. Zhuang also patted his head, and the master and apprentice laughed cheerfully. Mr. Zhuang looked around and said, "How can we do it alone? Go and invite young Master Xiang and the others too." Daji went to invite, and carried Xiang Mingxiu with Xiang Chao. So Daji's room became more lively. He sighed faintly, thinking to himself, "Forget it, let it be as fragrant as possible." Bai Shan and Bai Erlang roasted the first batch of venison, and gave it to Mr. Zhuang, Xiang Mingxiu and Man Bao, and then took the plate and roasted the second batch. Several people chatted while eating. "Sir, what was the imperial hospital like in the previous dynasty?" Mr. Zhuang wiped the corners of his mouth with a silk and said with a smile, "The previous dynasty was not called the Taiyuan Hospital, but the Imperial Doctor's Office. In fact, this dynasty is not called the Taiyuan Hospital, and the official name is also called the Imperial Doctor's Office, but I don't know when someone called it Tai. The hospital. Over time, everyone called it that." Man Bao blinked. "I remembered that the plaque on the plaque of the Taiyuan Hospital does indeed say the Imperial Physician's Office. I don't think there is any difference between the two, so I haven't paid attention to it yet." Mr. Zhuang smiled and said, "There are still some differences." He said, "In the previous dynasty, the Imperial Physician's Office was under the control of Taikang Temple. In addition to the imperial family's medicine, it occasionally taught some health workers, but the last emperor of the previous dynasty was brutal. Not only the imperial physician's office, but even places like Kuazijian were cut off. Now, by the time this dynasty was established, there would be scuffles all over the country and the affairs of the state would be so complicated that neither the late emperor nor his majesty could remember this, so there would be no life members. The imperial physician's office is still nominally under the name of Taikang Temple, but in reality, it has long since left Taikang Temple. It only listens to His Majesty's orders, so everyone privately changed the office to a hospital, and called it that way. See you at 6 p.m. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1289. Mr. Zhuang had obviously studied the past of the Taiyuan Hospital, and he was right. Not only Bai Shan's three juniors, but also Xiang Mingxiu were dumbfounded. In the former dynasty, the Imperial Physician Office would teach the staff to prevent diseases of the people, and there was a Shang Pharmacy Bureau in the province that purchased and stored medicinal materials. Mr. Zhuang said, "I asked Mr. Zhang that although the Imperial Physician Office is still under the name of Taikang Temple, it is no longer managed by Taikang Temple. The school is of the 4th rank, and it's only 1 rank lower than Taikang Saiking." Mr. Zhuang raised his eyes and glanced at Bai Shan and Man Bao. Although he didn't know what they had discussed, he knew that the disciple Mo Ruoshi, he said, "If you want to change the Imperial Hospital into the Imperial Medical Department, and then build a female Imperial Hospital next to it, I am afraid it will not be easy." Bai Shan asked curiously, "Then who was the former chief of the Imperial Physician's Office?" "The Imperial Doctor's Order, there are 2 people, only 7 rank." Everyone thought, no wonder it is not easy. If the old system is restored, Xiao Yuanzheng will change from the 4th rank to the 7th rank. After Mr. Zhuang finished the science for them, he sat leisurely and waited to eat venison. After thinking about it for a while, Man Bao said, "Why do we have to change forward when we have changed? Can we just change from what we learned in the past?" "Bai Shandao, do you want to learn the system of the Imperial Physician's Office, but maintain your current official status?" Man Bao nodded. Bai Shan also thought it was feasible, and after listening for a long time, Xiang Mingxiu, who had already figured out what was going on, said with a smile, "How can there be such a good thing in this world? You both want it, I'm afraid you can't catch one." Mr. Zhuang nodded slightly and said with a smile, the system of the Imperial Physician Office will need to add many officials. If you still want to maintain the current official rank, the cost of the Imperial Physician Office will be much more, and it is not only related to Taikang Temple. It is also related to the Ministry of Personnel and the Ministry of Household, so they may not agree. Man Bao and Bai Shan looked at each other, and became contemplative. Seeing that the venison was cooked, Mr. Zhuang smiled and said, "This matter is not something that can be negotiated in an instant. You might as well calm down and think about what you want from the Imperial Physician's Office and the Queen's Hospital. Let's talk about these systems. As for the interests involved, you shouldn't worry about it." He laughed. "Young people think too much, the president is not tall, and it's okay to collide with them. It's really thoughtful about everything, but the spirit is less, and things will probably change in the end." As soon as Bai Shan and Man Bao heard this, their hearts dropped, and their minds widened. The two of them looked at each other, but instead they thought seriously, what kind of Imperial Physician's Office and Women's Imperial Hospital do they want? No, it should be said, what kind of Imperial Medical Office and Female Imperial Hospital does Man Bao want? Her original intention was that female doctors could also take prescriptions and train more female doctors, but just listen to Mr. Can people in the hospital do it too? Man Bao was very ambitious, Bai Shan perfected her by the side, and Bai Erlang followed behind to add fuel to it, so the three people wrote more and more things in the notebook, and it became more and more outrageous. When Mr. Zhuang saw it the next morning, he had already memorized a lot of suggestions in a messy notebook. After he read it seriously, he shook his head with a smile and didn't say that they should change it, but said, "Since you want to do this, why not do it? Write a discussion table, and when the Queen asks, you will answer." Man Bao scratched his head and asked, "How do you write the watch?" Mr. Zhuang squinted his eyes, got up and went to the desk to rummage. After a long time, he found an old book and showed it to them, saying, "I borrowed this from Mr. Zhang, take a look, you don't understand. My teacher is a teacher, this watch is borrowed, it is the copy of Emperor Yuan Zhengshang, a famous minister of the previous dynasty, don't break it, it will be returned to Mr. Zhang in the future." Man Bao took the book and nodded shyly. "Then I went to study with Bai Shan and Bai Erlang." Bai Erlang had a headache when he saw the densely packed words, and turned his head slightly and said, "Let's study it. When you read it back, I will make a draft for you." Bai Shan couldn't see him being lazy, and said, "Go to the bookshelf and check if there are any medical books. We can also refer to it later." "Farewell, don't you know what books are at home?" Bai Erlang said, "If you want to find books, you have to go to the library building. I don't want to be a white worker." Man Bao also nodded, "Yes, we all know the books at home." Mr. Zhuang on the side coughed lightly, "Okay, it's getting late, those who should go to school, and those who should go to the doctor should also go to the doctor." Man Bao got up and handed the booklet to Bai Shan, "This is for you. I'm going to Li's house today to see Han Wu Niangzi, and then I'll go back to the palace and return to the Queen. Bai Shandao, I can go to the library at noon and after school in the afternoon. Remember not to promise the Queen first." "Don't worry, I won't promise her." Bai Shan was relieved, and only then did he collect the booklet and prepare the book basket to go out. The three of them got into the carriage and went out together. Mr. Zhuang saw that they were all gone, and after thinking about it, he turned around to pack up and went out. The weather was very cold, and there were far fewer people on the street than usual, and even fewer people came to see the doctor in Jes Etang. After seeing 5 patients, Man Bao told the shopkeeper Zhengda and Xiao Xiao to go to Li Mansion after he couldn't wait for a new patient. The shopkeeper Zheng took out a box and gave it to Xiao Xiao. "This is the first-class bird's nest ordered by the Li family in the shop, you can take it to them. By the way, this is the bill, remember to ask them to give the previous bill as well." Over. Man Bao curiously leaned forward to take a look, and couldn't help but stunned, this bird's nest is so expensive. The shopkeeper Zhengde stroked his beard and smiled and said, a rare thing is of course precious. He happily said, Han Wu Niangzi has suffered a serious crime in this production. Both the Li family and the Han family have ordered a lot of nourishing medicinal materials with me, including ginseng. You have to tell them when I deliver it. And eat these things when she is out of confinement and her body has stabilized. Man Bao, who would think of eating ginseng when he is stable? Why can't you eat it? It's used to make soup and stew chicken. It's a good tonic. It's called a medicinal diet. Do you understand? The shopkeeper Zheng patted her on the head and said with a smile, this health preservation depends on the accumulation of daily life. Why? Do you have to wait until you get sick before taking medicine? Man Bao thought about it and felt that what he said made sense, so he wrote it down. To prevent herself from forgetting, she even said to Xiao Xiao after getting in the car, you remember to remind me when the ginseng is delivered to Li's house, I'm afraid I will forget too much. Small peony should go down. Man Bao came to give Han Wu Niangzi a belly massage and acupuncture. After pressing her to the point of screaming, he slowly took away the needle and said, it's a good thing that the weather is cold, don't get cold, but don't put too many braziers in the house, your wound should scab over in 7 or 8 days. Han Wu Niang responded, her face was still a little pale, and asked, then can the scar on my stomach be removed? Man Bao said, it's impossible to completely remove it. When I look back, I will ask the shopkeeper Zheng if there is any ointment for light scars. I'll send you some so that it can be lightened a bit. See you at 9. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1290. Wu Niangzi Han was a little disappointed. Today is the 3rd day after the operation, and it still hurts a lot, but she can already see the scar on her stomach when Manbao is applying medicine. She feels ugly. Although she knew in her heart that she couldn't ask for too much, after all, she survived the situation of mortal death, but she still felt that the scar was ugly. Seeing her gloomy look, Man Bao comforted her and said, don't worry, take good care of it, the injury will heal faster, go back and apply the ointment from the first half of the year, and it will fade away. Man Bao was sure that the Li mansion was doing well, so he left and agreed to come back tomorrow. Before Han Wu Niang was completely out of danger, she would come to see it every day. After leaving the Li mansion, Man Bao was too lazy to go back to Ji Shidhang, and said directly, let's enter the imperial city, I have to enter the palace. Xiao Xiao was taken aback, am I going to? No, just take me to the gate of the palace. You have to take back the bills settled by the Li family. I will ask the people in the palace to take me home. Xiao Xiao breathed a sigh of relief. When Man Bao entered the palace, he refused the queen to go. The queen has already prepared the list of doctors and women in the current Taiyuan hospital. Man Bao's rejection was obviously not in her plan, but she just froze for a moment and asked with a smile, why don't you want to? Of course Man Bao couldn't say it outright, so he said, Niang, your concubine's hospital is really good, but my abilities are indeed limited, and I can't open the hospital and teach apprentices now. Empress, you don't have to belittle yourself. Your Majesty and I see your medical skills in the eyes. Not only my illness, but also the prince's condition, you have a clue. Xiao Yuan praises your medical skills. Man Bao said, that's because Xiao Yuan is being polite. I still need to learn more medical skills. You can also learn from the imperial physicians in the imperial hospital when you enter the palace. Man Bao shook his head with a smile, and said, Niang, if the imperial physicians really are willing to teach each other, how could the medical girls have been in the palace for many years without learning how to diagnose the pulse and prescribe it? The queen was silent. Man Baodao, they are willing to show me medical skills because I have something to return. I learned medical skills from them, and they get more from me. But I didn't teach them hand to hand, and they didn't teach me hand to hand. Given the knowledge, how much you can learn and how much you can comprehend depends on each person's talent and hard work, Man Bao said, and I can have these things. Talking to them is all based on the fact that I have seen various diseases outside, and then I have to study hard. If I don't have various cases from the people, I can't come up with all kinds of medical skills and prescriptions that they don't know, and I go to the Taiyuan hospital. Goodbye to me, I am afraid it will not be Dr. Zhou Xiao who can communicate, but a colleague who competes with them on the same stage. The queen understood what Man Bao meant. Are you afraid that you will be crushed? Man Bao paused, shook his head and said, I'm afraid I forgot my original intention. The queen raised her eyebrows, but the queen's hospital must have a female doctor to preside over it, otherwise why should it be established? But in this entire Jin dynasty, you are the only female doctor whose medical skills can take this responsibility. Man Baidao, if Niang is at ease, it is better to let Lu Yunu follow me to study. She is very savvy and knows a lot of pharmacology and medical theory. After 3 or 5 years of study, she will be a teacher. The queen laughed, Lu Yunu is only one person, what's the use? She paused and said, I found 12 medical girls for you, and I originally wanted you to teach them in the palace. After thinking about it, Man Bao shook his head, 12 people are too many, I only bring one Dr. Lu. The queen frowned. Man Bao took the opportunity to say, Niang, you set up a female imperial hospital in the palace. Then the concubine and princess in the harem fell ill. Should you hire a male imperial physician or a female imperial physician? The queen smiled and said, of course it's up to them, it also depends on the condition. But if they can all serve in the imperial hospital, why would the female imperial physicians go out to the people? Man Bao asked, when the time comes, will the imperial court set up a local medical office, or will they be allowed to open a medical office on their own? Or place an order in another pharmacy? The queen smiled and said, I want to assign them to the local pharmacy to place an order for consultation. At that time, not only will the pharmacy give them a penny, but the imperial court will also give them a piece of money. It sounds good, but how do you choose this place? Is it the women's hospital that decides, or is it their own choice? Man Bao continued to ask, what if you don't want to leave Beijing to become a female doctor in a local place after graduation? Naturally, there is a way of not going, except that the first batch of birth members were medical women, she decided to select the other birth members from the palace. Or select female relatives from the criminal records to cultivate, these people can be directly compiled into the craftsmanship, and they will naturally obey the orders of the imperial court. The first batch of medical women only had to stay in Beijing to teach the students, which was also an honor for them. But the queen looked down at Man Bao, who was still young, and didn't tell her this, but comforted her, don't worry, the court can come up with a solution. Man Bao tilted his small head and glanced at the queen suspiciously, and then shook his head after a pause, Niang, let's discuss it again, otherwise you will let Dr. Lu follow me to study first. The queen didn't force her, she nodded with a smile, all right, then I'll let Dr. Lu go home today, and she will follow you to study in the future. The queen paused for a while and asked with a smile, I heard people say that you only consult for half a day, right? Man Bao nodded, I only visit Ji Shitang for half a day, but there are always cases, so I spend most of the day seeing a doctor. The queen said, don't let her be too slack when teaching Lu Yunu, or let her serve by your side and listen to the teaching sooner or later. Man Bao shuddered and shook his head again and again, forget it, I didn't accept her as an apprentice, I just gave her some pointers and taught her. I'm still a student myself, how can I accept an apprentice? It's scary to think about being served by someone like a husband in front of her husband. She doesn't want to do that. The queen was amused, and said to Aunt Chang, okay, you can send Dr. Zhou Xiao out. By the way, didn't the crown princess send 2 pots of chrysanthemums last time, although they haven't bloomed, but I think the leaves are not bad. Obviously it's well raised. I heard that it's still a very rare color. Go pick a pot and give it to Dr. Zhou Xiao. He added, and the fox fur sent by the prince last time, let someone pick a few and reward her. And Chang should go. Then the queen said to Man Bao, the weather is getting colder and colder now, and you are often running outside. You take the fox fur to make a fox fur to put it on, and it will be warmer. Man Bao would never refuse their reward, and accepted it after salutes and thanked him. Aunt Chang sighed when she saw Wei Wei, and when she sent Man Bao out, she couldn't help reminding her, Dr. Zhou, you are too courageous. The lady has an invitation, how can you refuse again and again? Man Bao blinked, can't you refuse? Aunt Chang, this is the good nature of the goddess. If you meet another master, you won't be so easy to talk about. Not to mention rewards, it would be nice to be able not to ask sins. See you tomorrow.